This is an interesting quote from Linus Pauling. I feel sorry for people who don't know anything about chemistry. They're missing an important source of happiness. Probably a lot of people would disagree with that. But I find happiness in chemistry. The greenhouse effect. So I'm not going to test you on this, but it leads to an example that the author uses. And I think it's good to have an idea. You know, climate change is this big deal right now. And I think it would be better if we all just knew a little more about what's going on. So there are greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And these are important, otherwise our planet would be very, very cold and couldn't support life. So these greenhouse gases allow energy from the sunlight to come in, and that energy warms the Earth's surface, but the presence of these gases prevents some of the radiant heat from leaving. So it kind of acts like the glass roof of a greenhouse and keeps it warmer than it would be otherwise. So there's a balance between incoming energy from the sun and radiant energy that's lost through the greenhouse gases, and that's what regulates the temperature of the Earth. So scientists have measured an average 0.7 degrees Celsius rise in atmospheric temperature since 1860. Okay, that was a long time ago. And we can look at graphs like this and say, oh, you know, this is super scary. So you always have to question data. How accurate were the measurements taken in 1860? How are they determining average global temperature, right? Are they averaging from the same places? There's just so many questions about the data. But here we see the global temperature, and there does clearly seem to be a rise here. But also note the scale here. This is a 1 degree Celsius rise. That is a small amount, though sometimes small amounts are significant. But still, it's not as scary as the graph looks. We've also measured atmospheric CO2 levels, and those have also risen. Those have risen 38%. And there seems to be at least a correlation here. But is there a causal relationship? Is the increase in temperature causing the increase in CO2? Or is the increase in CO2 causing the increase in temperature? Or are they just coincidental? These are questions that are very, very difficult to answer. And I'll just tell you right now, I have not taken the time to thoroughly investigate global warming because I actually have a life. But I am skeptical. I hear a lot of very conflicting things, and I'm not at all convinced that there is a crisis of global warming. You have to consider that the average temperature of the Earth varies over long, long periods of time, like thousands of years, right? And we don't have data back that long. We can estimate things from size of tree rings and various things, but we don't have a lot of solid data. And so it's possible that this rise we're seeing right now is a normal rise and will be followed by a normal fall. So there's just a lot of questions. Now, should we be responsible and reduce our pollution and CO2 emissions and stuff? Yeah, absolutely. We should do what we can within reason. But should we make big quality of life sacrifices to do that? I don't think that's necessary. I don't think we need to destroy the economy to save the Earth, because the data is just not that convincing, at least what I've seen. So, where is this increase in CO2 coming from? Well, one source is combustion of fossil fuels, right? Another source of CO2 is volcanic action. It's a natural source. Volcanoes add CO2 to the atmosphere. So how can we judge whether global warming is natural or due to our use of fossil fuels? Well, we can't really connect this with global warming, but we can look at this rise in CO2, is this due to our use of fossil fuels, or is this due to natural action of volcanoes or something else? So we need to understand the relationship between the burning of fossil fuel, the combustion, and the amount of CO2 that is given off. Did you have a question?
It's kind of a comment. I was watching a documentary on it, and they were saying that like they can measure the amount of carbon by like going and digging down. I think they were doing it in ice, and they're saying that like it fluctuates, like it increases and it decreases. But right now we're at a point where it's increased past the point that it's ever been, so it's the highest that it's ever been. So it just keeps going out, and we don't see it going back in when it should be going back in, or going down.
Right, and that's very interesting, right? And you take all those pieces together, and is it something we should be aware of and concerned about? Sure. Is it something we have to panic about? I don't think so. But yeah, there's different ways of looking at it, and you can get some very well-respected scientists who disagree heatedly. I just saw a thing about NASA and something about the temperature change being due to fluctuations in the Earth's orbit, and totally not being related. And of course they made it sound like some conspiracy that NASA's concealing this from the general public. Yeah, how do you know what to believe? It's really tough.